Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Draft. Again, I'm sitting here with my good pal, Frankie Abbott. Make sure you're following him at Frankie Films. Draft is coming up, Frankie. It's really coming up. We're so close to it. It's such a long period between that free agency and the draft. It feels like forever. It really does. So I'm excited to get into this. And we had some questions. We did a Q&A today, a mailbag episode. And we're going to get into everybody's thing. But first, Frankie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Been a pretty good day. Got to do some pretty fun interviews with the Irish NFL show. Make sure you guys check those out if you get the opportunity. But had a pretty nice day, Got to watch some play-in basketball last night, which was a good time. But enjoying getting to check that out a little bit. As you said, we got 14 days until the NFL draft. So I'm just counting down the hours, getting ready, getting all my final thoughts ready, my favorite players ready, having my final little plum drop dreams of who I want to end up in blue and orange this season. So I'm feeling great, man. Excited to dive into it with you today, answer these wonderful questions that people all sent in for us, and just all around excited to spend some time with my boy Joey,
Let's go, man. Let's go. I'm super excited for this one. We got a lot of good questions. So shout out to all of the listeners of the podcast. Shout out to everybody on Twitter that gave us an answer. Shout out to everybody in the Discord. If you're not in the Discord, go join the Discord. We were talking ball in there all the time. If you want to talk with Bree, Zach, Joey, Frankie, anybody, you can come in the Discord and we're in there all the time talking ball, talking shop. So it's good. But let's do No, Cam, I do not have a hat on today. Shout out to Cam Parker.
How's it going, Cameron?
But I kind of want to just go through some Broncos news before we hop into these questions that they asked us. First, Frankie, Courtland Sutton, this just came out. It seemed like a deal was imminent before the Broncos just had pulled out. I have a question, how do you feel about that? I'm curious even what your gauge is on his value. That's something I'm really interested in, is what did the Ravens offer? I wish we got those details.
Yeah, I mean, it's not surprising, that's for sure. I mean, the jury's been out for about 2 years now that the Denver Broncos have been looking to trade one of their receivers. Seems like Courtland Sutton was the guy that another team had their sights set on. As far as the value, man, I can't imagine it was too much. I'd like to imagine maybe it crept up to a fourth or a third rounder, but when I really think about it, you got Amari Cooper last year going for a fifth rounder. Obviously, his contract plays a little bit of a factor into that. You got Courtland Sutton, who's probably on an $11-14 million cap hit this season. I can't imagine you getting I'd hope it was a fourth or a fifth rounder if I'm praying, but my gut kind of tells me that it might have been a fifth rounder and then maybe something next year, a seventh next year or something. I don't think it would have been ended up too great. So I'm glad that they were able to kind of hold off on that, or maybe that the Ravens ended up going another direction, because I do think if you're going to evaluate Russell Wilson, you might as well have as many weapons possible for him. I don't think it does anyone really good does anyone any good on the entire offense to kind of remove from it at this point. So what are your thoughts?
No, yeah, I agree with you. It just doesn't seem so. To make a trade, the offer has to be worth it to you. It's not, everyone wants to put a price tag on it and be I wouldn't trade him for unless this. But Courtland Sutton is a starter on this team. That's the way I see it. So that increases his value to the Broncos specifically. Right. That's part of making a trade, is it has to be more than what he's valued on my team. And Courtland Sutton is a starter. He's a guy that I expect to produce this next year. Is he that dominant number one wide receiver like Broncos country once thought he would be? I don't really think so. But a fifth round pick does not move the needle enough for me to move one of my starters. It just doesn't. Who am I drafting with a fourth round pick? It's slim pickings in the fourth round. Everyone seems to think that you're going to draft a star in the fourth round, and I just don't think that's very likely. It's more likely that player is going to be cut in year 3, I think, than him be a starter.
Right.
So it's just, I don't know. It's hard for me to validate that. Trade Courtland Sutton for a guy that, I really hope and pray is a starter one day. That's just not something that's worth it to me.
No, and I mean, when you look at, I'd say the day 3 draft picks from last year, outside of Damari Mathis and outside of Henningsen, we haven't really seen too much out of there. So it's not like we have this grand track record of having these incredible day threes. Year one was a little bit better, but like, I think it is kind of the smarter move to keep around a good presence in the locker room, a good leader for the younger receivers that hopefully they can still add to the receiver room. I think that's kind of the biggest part of it is if you remove Courtland Sutton, the receiver room becomes like a big need, whereas you can still add to that room, I think, this season. I don't think there's any problem. And I mean, with Courtland Sutton, I mean, this is kind of the big thing to keep in mind, and you've mentioned this before too. Now we kind of know that they were already willing to do it. If this season starts off slow, guys, Courtland Sutton's gone, like straight up. It's gonna if they start off this year, 2-5 or whatever, there's no chance they're keeping him around. If they were already willing to move on from this point, they're gonna try to cash in their chips while they still can. Courtland will probably want to go play for a bit of a playoff contender, which all glory to him. I hope he gets the opportunity to do so and really tear it up. So I think that's kind of something to keep in mind is while the trade didn't take place, this kind of, I think, is a very big red flag that if this season does not start off, hot, there might be some heads that roll on this Broncos roster, and the first one is probably going to be Courtland Sutton, and nothing against him or his fault at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be one of the two. If the Broncos start off slow, it's going to be Jerry Jeudy or Courtland Sutton. I mean, maybe even both. It depends how bad the Broncos are playing. I think that's something that could happen is the Broncos trade both if the Broncos just are not good this next year. So I definitely agree with that. But Frankie, I want to also add on to.
I got a question. Hold on. Yeah, so let me ask you this. So with the core player thing, this is random. This is something that's been upsetting me because Jerry Jeudy was called a core player. Okay. So if they end up moving off of Jerry Jeudy, I guess, and this is completely opinion based, we haven't been in NFL. We haven't been in NFL locker rooms. We haven't been given contracts. We haven't been called core players and then eventually traded or any shit like that. If you put yourself into a Broncos player's shoes, what impact do you think that has on a locker room? If this would be, say Jerry Jeudy gets traded this season, that would be 3 consecutive years where the front office has declared a player to be a core player that they are trying to build around to be a cornerstone piece of the rebuild. And then they move them. Does that gives me concern, but at the same time, that could just be front office speech and I'm just being too much of a fan and don't buy into too much of what these guys are saying. But it has to rub these guys somewhat the wrong way, right? That's the way I feel. At least, what do you think?
No, I mean, I disagree with you. If I were advising George Payton, I would tell him he needs to stop this core player talk for real. He needs to stop it. I understand it. You're trying to give the player, some confidence or that we won't get rid of you. You're a core player here. You're a guy that we wouldn't move. That's pretty much what that says, right? I don't know how else to read it. If you're saying someone is a core player, it's somebody that you would not move. He's a guy that is going to stay here as a Denver Bronco. I would just stop calling core players. I would say that he's really important. I don't know. I would stop using that.
Yeah, because
it's crazy to me. I would just stop using that term altogether. Unless it really is a player you would not move. Let's start saying Patrick Surtain is a core player. That's a core player. Why do we have to stretch it out to the players that are on the block?
The trade block.
The guys that we know are available. Why are we calling it's crazy?
Because it just kind of gets into this, I don't know, when you look at the successful teams, I always say about this, you need to have a concise vision from top down, from ownership to the freaking ball boy that's bringing the ball onto the field every play. You got to have a concise vision as a team. That's how players know their roles. That's how you have a really good development. You have really good, all that stuff. You see teams like the Chiefs be able to do this really well, not trying to hype up the Chiefs too much, but that just has to send such it just shows, I think, disconnect in top down in the organization. It shows, and again, it just I think it's got to rub the players semi the wrong way. These words are just becoming more and more hollow. How are they supposed to feel good about these negotiations they have over their contracts with guys like George Payton if it just feels like, oh, by the way, we might have made you all these promises and made it sound like we really are invested in you and you're a big part of our future. But then 4 months, we're trying to send you out the door as quick as possible because maybe something else on the team isn't working out. It's a little bit crazy to me.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. Paul chimes in. He says core players to me are quarterback, left tackle, cornerback.
That's fair.
Yeah, no, that's definitely fair. If you have a elite player at any one of those positions, they are core players. They are players that you would not move. They're hard positions to find. The value of having an elite player at one of those positions on the field is so great that it's really hard to move off of them. So yeah, no, Frankie, I totally agree with you there. We talked about Courtland Sutton almost being traded to the Ravens. I want to talk about the Ravens quarterback because Ben Roethlisberger came out. And I know this is a Broncos podcast, everybody. I just want to touch on this real quick. Ben Roethlisberger came out and be like, yeah, he doesn't really fear anybody throwing from the pocket is pretty much what it was. It's not quote unquote. I'm paraphrasing a little bit there. But yo, what's up, man? I want to say this. Everybody with Lamar Jackson, it's so polar opposite. You have one group of people talking about like he's Peyton Manning throwing the football in the pocket. And you have another group of people talking about how he's like incapable at it. And the truth is, it's probably somewhere in between, right? Mm-hmm. But what that does when you're just hyper focused on that, I'm throwing from the pocket. That's the only thing I'm worrying about. It's taking away that he's literally one of the best open field runners in all of the NFL. That seriously, and what that does in the passing game, it opens things up in the passing game. It makes it easier for him to throw from the pocket, right? That's something that is absolutely true. And I also want to add, it's not like he's incapable. He's not. He's definitely good as a pocket quarterback. He can make throws. You see what he does in between the numbers in specific. It's to me, it feels like if we gave the Lamar Jackson what it would take to impress some people as a pocket quarterback, he might be the best quarterback of all time paired with his legs. Seriously. Yeah. That's just what it is. He is so elite at that one thing that it makes everything else easier. And then to go along with that, he's pretty good at it. Just that. He's pretty good pocket quarterback. If he needs to throw in the pocket, he can get the job done. He's good. I don't know. It just feels like the expectations put on Lamar Jackson are so unfair to me. We're talking about an MVP quarterback, a former MVP quarterback that has gone to the playoffs every single year he's been in the NFL. It's just unfair. It's unrealistic to ask that of anybody. We don't put, you know what? If Matt Ryan could juke a couple dudes out, man, let me tell you. Like, we don't do any of that stuff. It's out of control. It's very stupid to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's just first of all, Lamar Jackson's still 26, and that just is a part that gets brushed over so much. This man is 26 years old, and we've watched him get better every time he's on the football field. Every time, seriously. Like, the man hasn't gotten worse. He might get hurt, but he really does not end up getting worse. The second part of that is anyone who believes that they can just let Lamar Jackson throw the ball should go ask Vic Fangio what he thinks, because he's seen it. There were games where Vic Fangio said, I'm not letting you run, but we're going to see if you can throw it. That man can throw that thing. I don't know how people believe that. Another part of it is like, man, look at the receivers that they have brought for him. The only receiver that they've had in Baltimore who's been, like, I'd say an elite talent or at least a plus talent, not trying to take away from the guys that they have there, is Mark Andrews. Guess who's been one of the most productive tight ends in the NFL since Lamar Jackson started playing? Mark Andrews. He makes the players around him better. He makes them productive. He is single-handedly arguably the best offensive weapon in the game. You have to game plan for him like nobody else. He's like a Giannis. He's like a Nikola Jokic in the NBA. You cannot formulate a game plan that doesn't involve shutting down number 8. It's ridiculous.
It'll light you up.
These other quarterbacks, you can hope that, like, oh, you know, we can take away his number one weapon and hope that he ends up not being able to do that much. You can try to lock down his receivers and hopefully take some stuff away. Lamar Jackson is such a vital piece to what that entire organization is. Like, it just can't really be diminished. And it's really upsetting that people still try to do so. So, yeah.
Yeah, another note, someone in the comments, he just says it straight up. Jackson hasn't had an OC worth a damn. Once he hasn't. Greg Roman, really, really, like, he would be one of the most elite run game coordinators in the entire NFL. As an offensive coordinator, there's a little more to it, right? So I don't know. I give Greg Roman a little credit just for what he's been able to do with quarterbacks that can really move. But at the same time, his passing concepts are so simple. Like there's not a lot going on there. So I definitely agree with that as well. And then Cam Parker chimes in. He says, "This is why I'm excited about OBJ in Baltimore. We will see a different Lamar." I'm excited for what Odell will do down there as well. It feels like Odell to me is one of the biggest what ifs. Really, 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 really like what his peak was like, and it was a really short peak with the Giants. He looked so unbelievable. We hadn't really seen a wide receiver like him where he could win at the catch point, make these ridiculous catches like he could, while also just at the same time being able to take a quick slant for a touchdown. Like that's a rare quality. You could take a 10-yard pass to the house. Odell could do that. So I'm excited what he'd do. Obviously, he's coming off of injury. I don't have those same expectations on him. It almost feels like to me a little bit, and Frankie, we were talking about this before the podcast, Lamar has been so upset about, hey, he hasn't given me they haven't given me the weapons needed to succeed. Odell, I don't really know if that's going to move the needle all that crazy enough, honestly. So
yeah, and I hope that team doesn't stop adding too. I mean, they have a pick at 22. There's plenty of receivers that should be around in their second round pick around that 55 spot. Like they're in a good position, I think, to still be able to add weapons on this offense. Like imagine if they were able to end up getting like a Bijan Robinson or something in the first, or maybe like a Jameer Gibbs if it ends up being something like that. You can literally make this offense so rejuvenated. So I hope that like they don't see Odell Beckham as like, oh, we did it. Like, you know, like they can still do much more.
Totally. So we're 16 minutes, 30 seconds in. Let's move into some Broncos questions. Shout out again to everybody that asked us questions on Twitter, in the Discord. If you're not in the Discord, I'll say it again. Go join.
Get in the Discord.
Let's move on to the questions though. D Bronx asks, who are some currently projected round 1, early round 2 prospects you can see falling to the Broncos' 3rd round pick this year? Kind of like Travis Jones, who Frankie and I were massive fans of coming out of the draft from last year off the top of my head. Frankie, do you have an answer to this question? Who is someone you could see fall?
So one name that I've kind of been keeping my eye on is I'm curious to see how JL Skinner ends up kind of reacting. So he was one of my favorite safety prospects. You heard us talk about him on our safety episode. He's a really talented prospect. He's like 6'3", 215, who's like kind of plays that Cam Chancellor type role. And he's the guy who ended up tearing his pectoral in the pre-draft process. That'll probably end up knocking him down like a round or 2. But I don't think that'll be one that'll hamper him at all for his rookie season, or at least be a long-term thing. It's not like he tore his Achilles or something like that. Like this is a torn pectoral for a DB. So he's a guy I've definitely got my eye on if they're interested in going to the DB room. The corner position is something to be very interested to look at, because I'd say right now there's like 5 or 6 guys that I think could end up being first-round picks, and there's genuinely like it's just a very, very, very deep class in general. So I wouldn't be shocked if we see someone like, you know, Cam Smith, or maybe we see like, I don't think Joey Porter will, but like one of those guys kind of make their way into like the 40s or 50s picks, just because there are so many good corners. And I'm interested to see how many teams really make that push for them, because when you talk about, you've got guys like Devon Witherspoon, you got Christian Gonzalez, you got like guys like Keely Ringo, you've got both the South Carolina corners. You've got a lot of guys, I think, that are going to end up pushing some other guys down the board. And then I'd say also like the edge class. A guy like Keon White is a guy I think hasn't been getting enough love, and he's like just an athletic freak. Primo Ooze makes a great comment. Julius Brents is another great example of a corner that can end up sliding. So I think those positions will be interesting to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on those ones. I'm going to take kind of an opposite stance. I'm going to take a position I think is weaker at the top, and why. Okay, so I'll lay it out for you real quick. I'm going to go with pretty much any of the wide receivers. And I'll tell you why. It's because it isn't very top heavy. It isn't at all. It's not a very top heavy class. To me, there isn't a huge drop off from some of the guys we see mocked early in the first round, or not necessarily early, but usually these wide receivers going mid first round or something like that, to the guys that are going in the second, to the guys that are going in the early third. There's just not a huge drop off there for me. So it wouldn't shock me whatsoever to see a team go, hey, I value the skill set, so I'm taking the skill set. Not necessarily I love this player, so I'm taking this player. More so just looking at the board and be like, I need this specific skill set, part of my wide receiver core, so we're going to take him here. it wouldn't shock me at all to see some guys that we see mocked earlier and the wide receivers go a little later. Frankie, what do you think about that?
No, I completely agree. I mean, you think about names like A.T. Perry, maybe an Xavier Hutchinson, Tillman was mentioned in the chat. A guy like Josh Downs could end up slipping. Like you said, I mean, we've said it many times, at least with the receiver room, it seems like you can argue that there's maybe one or two guys that you're saying are like surefire first rounders, but there's probably like, I'd say 8 receivers right now that are in that like top 50-ish, top 75 range. And it'll be interesting to monitor this year because with the lack of kind of top end talent, the past few years, we've just seen receivers go off the board. It doesn't really seem to matter, regardless of how talented they end up being. I mean, I think last year about like Jahan Dotson ended up going like 17 to the Redskins, the Commanders. Oh my goodness, that was a blast from the past. He ended up going to the Commanders, and I'm not nothing to try to take against him, but it's just kind of, it's crazy seeing like that's a very high selection for a receiver that I wasn't necessarily sure warranted it too much, especially when you talk about the frame that he was playing with. So I'm curious if it'll be a situation of if teams kind of back off a little bit and say, hey, this receiver class maybe is a little bit weaker. We've over kind of loaded the value of this position, both with receiver contracts the past few years we've been drafting them out the yin yang. So I do wonder if we possibly see, like you said, like a couple of receivers like those guys fall into the 3rd round possibly.
Yeah, I mean, you're totally right. I think it's going to be one of those years, Frankie, where guys that are marked a little later maybe go earlier. It's going to just be shocking for the wide receiver core. Paul said Cedric Tillman. I would be so excited.
Tillman's a great one.
I love Tillman. I absolutely love him. Primo Ooze, he comes in. He says, "Is DJ Turner a first or second in your opinion?" Frankie, do you have
as far as like a pick, I say he might end up honestly dropping down to like the day 3. He's another perfect example of like, dude, this corner class is just so good that he's one of those guys that might kind of fall by the wayside because these other guys just have so many more traits. You could say like DJ Turner is an incredible athlete coming out of Michigan, but like when you talk about some of the size these other guys bring to the table, when you talk about some of the competition they've gotten to face a little bit more, I think that we'll probably see DJ Turner end up being like the 7th to maybe 10th corner off the board. And like that could end up being, however far down, that could end up being in the 50s or 60s.
Yep. Cam chimes into the wide receiver conversation. He says, not to mention if Denver is hell-bent on moving court, Judy, Denver could draft one in that 67 to 68 range. It wouldn't shock me. I think that Callaway move was a little bit of them being like, hey, if we have to move someone, we're still okay. We have a player we like at the wide receiver position to come in and, serve a role. Colton Cooper comes in. He says, A.T. Perry moves so well for his size. Like him a lot. And hearing him break down corners, you can just tell he's a smart player. A.T. Perry is a good player. I know Frankie has liked A.T. Perry. He's had some good comments to say about him.
Yeah, I think he was on the bootleg pod with Brett Coleman, and I agree. He was a really fun player to listen to. And then getting to Cam's comment, I mean, totally. I think they met with Rashee Rice today, who's actually the SMU receiver. He's actually kind of similar to Cortland Sutton, which is kind of funny. Both out of SMU, both kind of have that similar like 6'3", 6'4", 215 build. But 100%. I think that could be a very interesting thing to see them monitor. Yep.
And then let's move on to the next one here. Second question. Let me move this one off real quick. Greg Hunt says that are some of these visits smokescreen? Only 2 visits from last year ended up on the team. One was an undrafted free agent. These guys that are visiting with the Broncos, you just mentioned it with Rashee Rice. How much of this is smokescreen? How much of this is the truth? These are guys the Broncos are interested in, would love to draft. Tell me, Frankie, what do you think there?
I mean, it's interesting to say the least. I don't know if I want to I won't say any of these are like guaranteed smoke screens or any of these are guaranteed not. I always like to look at visits to kind of see what positions they're more so looking at. It's always really hard to be like, oh, they met with, DeMarvion Overshown, for example. That guy's their pick at 67, like they're definitely just, using that time to gather intel. Obviously, he's a player that's on their board somewhere, but I'd say it's very hard to tell, I don't know if I'd really say that any of these so far are smoke screens. I mentioned Rashee Rice. I think he would be a great fit. I think they met with like Ojomo. They met with the guard like Zavala from North Carolina State. Like they all make sense. I haven't really seen any that I'm like, oh, that one makes no sense. They're clearly trying to throw someone off the trail. Like the way I see it so far, these are all kind of logical. I don't know. I think if anything, it could just be the front office, some of the new people kind of doing some due diligence, maybe doing some guys' favor. There's always the chance it's some agents being like, hey, bring my guy in for a visit so it gets his name on other people's draft boards, and they're really good friends with Sean Payton or some stuff. I don't know. It's all conjecture by me. I'm just absolutely guessing at this point. So, yeah.
Yeah.
What about you?
I mean, Frankie, I think that the biggest example of smokescreen I can think of are these teams that like to pump fake, like they're looking for a quarterback or whatever, to try to get somebody to trade up, or even the teams that'll be like bring in no quarterbacks when they clearly need one, to be like, oh, yeah, we don't need it.
Guys, Houston might draft Will Anderson at 2. They totally might.
Exactly.
Totally might.
Perfect example. That is a smokescreen to me. That is a perfect example of a smokescreen. And it's at a position where you get people to move up and down. That's the only reason to do the smokescreen. You want to either, hey, please trade up. You know what I mean? Yeah. Or you might not bring anybody in because you're like, we don't need a quarterback. Meanwhile, on draft night, you're going to hit the phone hard and be like, hey, we need this pick. That is where the smoke screen comes in. It's mostly to move up and down. It's hard to smoke screen when you're in the third round. Because for starters, nobody knows who's going to be available in the third round.
Everybody's already been up twice before you're even on the board, man. Like you're completely right. That's a great point. Like you got to at least be able to trick somebody. The team at 70 isn't like, oh shit, what's Denver about to do? I mean, they will be on draft night, but right now they're not sitting there like, man, I swear to God, if Denver ends up taking Keanu Pettin at 68, I'm going to lose my mind,
Right. Paul says, if we bring in a punter, it's a smokescreen. That I might agree with. If the Broncos drafted a punter in the third round, it would be ridiculous. No, I don't know. If they got a team to trade up for a punter, that would be even more remarkable. But let's move on to the next question. And it is another one from D Bronx. 2 questions. He says, seems like depth can be upgraded all over the roster with day 3 picks. What positions, if any, would you be surprised to see them actually address in the draft? Frankie, is there a position you would be shocked to be like, what? The Broncos took that position with their first pick?
With the first pick, I'll probably say
first pick.
Man, that's a really good question. I'd probably say I don't think that they're going to take a tackle early on. I think that they're pretty comfortable with the tackle room of Bulls and McGlinchey, even though that does seem like they were trying to possibly move Bulls this offseason. I think that's going to be the tackle room. As much as it devastates me and the rest of Tackle Bros on Twitter, I don't think this is the year where Denver takes like a day 2 developmental tackle. I still think that they might end up taking one in the later rounds, as we've kind of said many times. Like with them having this many later picks, like just take the best players on the board. Like I'm not really going to be even, we're talking about kicker and punter. If it's the 7th round, okay, I might be a little upset if they take a kicker and punter. Honestly, I kind of take that back. But within reason, I don't think that there's necessarily a spot on this roster that couldn't use a little bit of an upgrade, whether it's in the depth department or if you're looking to push a starter or possibly have a new starter next year or in a couple years. So I'll probably say offensive tackle, but I don't think there's really anywhere that I'd be like, why did they do that?
Right.
How about you?
The only one I could really think of, and I'm going to put it specifically on that first pick or maybe even the second one because they're back to back, would be quarterback. That one would shock me just because of how much faith
that's a good point.
Put into their backup quarterback that they signed this offseason, and they made it such a priority to sign him. It made it seem like, this is our backup quarterback no matter what. Before that signing, it wouldn't have shocked me. It would not have shocked me if the Broncos said, hey, is that DTR available right there? I like DT, and they took him. It wouldn't have shocked me. But now that they've signed a guy, they paid him more than I think I would have anticipated. It was the first signing of the Broncos offseason, which leads me to believe that it was a priority signing for this team. I now would be shocked if they drafted a quarterback earlier with their picks.
I actually do have another one then. So I'd say, and this one's a little bit specific, this team does not need like a zero tech. This team does not need a nose tackle. DJ Jones, massive signing last year, was absolutely humongous for them. And you have Mike Purcell right behind him. That's not to say this team does not need interior defensive line. They very much need 3 techs. They very much need guys that can kind of shift around a little bit more. But if you were to talk about like the Psyche Ika out of Baylor, you were talking about any of those guys that are really just like these pinball how 6+, however, 320+ pound guys that you're just planting right in the middle on first and second down. They really have no need for that this year. Like if Travis Jones, as much as it pains me, if Travis Jones was coming out this year, I'd probably be like, you don't really need Travis Jones. I don't think, like, as much as it pains me, I do think because he doesn't really offer too much flexibility.
Travis Jones is a lot like DJ Jones.
Right, exactly. Where it's just kind of like it's a little bit redundant. And again, like I think it worries me if they do. I'm not trying to bash Mike Purcell. If they view Mike Purcell as that third guy in the rotation on their defensive line, because I do not view him as a starter. I don't view DJ Jones as a 3, and I don't view Mike Purcell as a 3. I'd much rather Mike Purcell be sitting behind DJ Jones, and then if you're wanting to run some 4-down stuff, you bring both of them onto the field. But I'd much rather see them add to that defensive line room and have you have a rotation of Zach Allen, or your front 3 be a rotation of Zach Allen, DJ Jones, and then, maybe you draft a guy, maybe you bring in a veteran or something, then force it to be Zach Allen, DJ Jones, and Mike Purcell. Because as I keep saying, Mike Purcell's, like, most snaps in a Bronco uniform in a season are at like 500-600. He has not played like a starting caliber level of snaps yet, and this man is like 32, 33 years old. Not saying he can't do it, but it's a lot to ask out of a guy and a lot to expect out of a guy that I don't think is necessarily showed that that's his best usage. His best usage is as that early down run stopper that you're giving like 500 snaps a season.
Yeah, he's pretty much and he's really good at this, by the way. I want to make that absolutely clear. He's a really good base nose tackle.
Mm-hmm.
And the league has moved more into we are running more nickel than we're running base. We might even be running more dime. Like, this is what we're doing. He's a base nose tackle. Is where he thrives. And then that's kind of, if you're in base, that's where I feel comfortable moving DJ Jones out from that nose tackle. And now we're going to get really, really big. But how many times a game are you in base, really? You're mostly in nickel nowadays. Right. So it's just, I don't know. It would also shock me if the Broncos drafted a 1, because DJ Jones can fill that position. He's played that position. Then you also have Mike Purcell. So I agree with that one.
Yeah, they need guys that can get after the quarterback along that defensive line. Not really at that edge position, but as far as like guys along the interior, that's the main thing they need, I'd say, is guys that can get after the quarterback. And Purcell doesn't offer you that.
Totally. Joey asks, oh my God, what a great question.
Who's this guy?
I mean, this might be the best question ever. He said, rank running back, interior defensive line, and cornerback in terms of what is the biggest needs.
Okay. I'll go, obviously, I guess.
Well, go ahead, my man. Go
ahead. I'm going to say running back is my number 1. Mainly because of the assumption I have that I don't think Javonte Williams is going to be ready to go. I hope they don't rush him back. I think that he will be a little bit hampered by the time he's ready to start up. Maybe he won't be. I'm praying he won't be. I would love to see Javonte Williams just walk off this injury like it didn't really hamper him. His career gets to continue on the exact same trajectory. In week 1, he's the Broncos starting running back getting 25+ carries. I would absolutely love that, but the realist in me kind of says, I don't think that that's too realistic. And I was also kind of like, I don't know, again, I'd rather him kind of come back when he's ready, kind of when we're fully certain that he's 100%. So I'd say right now, you really just have Samaje Perine and what they have. I think they still have Tyler Beatty in the room. That is not really a running back room right now.
They also signed that TJ Jones guy.
Okay, and they signed TJ Jones. So I'd say right now, like, you just literally need a body in the backfield. Like, Samaje Perine's not a guy you're giving 30 touches a game. I think he is a decent guy to give like 5 to 15, but he's not a guy you're giving 30, 35 touches a game. So I'd rather see them bring in another guy that can kind of split that workload up a little bit. So I think that running back right now is probably the biggest. Behind that, I'm going to say interior defensive line. Actually, oh man, that's tough. So never mind. Strike that. Pass, Frankie. You're stupid. It's corner. I'm going corner.
Corner one. So, okay.
No, corner 2. Running back is still 1,
okay.
But corner's jumping interior defensive line. So, because corner, they do not really have the bodies. Like interior defensive line, I have concerns because it seems like they're very much relying on the progression of Jonathan Harris, Matt Henningsen, and Oyama Wazirike. And I'm not trying to say that those guys can't make the jump. I actually like a couple of those guys a good bit, but like it's a lot to rely on that, and it's very hard for me to be like, ooh, this isn't a need because you have these three guys. Whereas when you look at the cornerback room, so after Damari, Patrick Surtain, and K'Wan Williams, which when you're talking about nothing against K'Wan has a little bit of injury concerns himself. He's not necessarily a guy you're expecting to play a full 17 game slate, excuse me. I think it's got to be corner because you've got Tremon Smith, who he's kind of more of a pure special teamer. We haven't really seen him have an extended stay as an outside corner at the next level. So I don't necessarily know if you have outside corners outside of you have Jaquan McMillan. We'll see how he ends up looking this year. And then as far as nickel goes, Faion Hicks has a situation going on right now, a little bit of off the field stuff. We don't know necessarily where he might end up being. He might not be on the roster for week 1. So when you talk about corner, I mean, they really do not have a backup nickel right now. Their backup corner or their fourth DB, their dime corner, if you will, they don't have one. This is a roster that desperately needs bodies. Right now, I'd say a corner and running back. So I'd say those have to be in first and second. But interior defensive line is not far behind purely because, like I said, you're relying on guys to take steps forward that you saw this team wasn't very confident in last year. I think Henningsen showed a lot last year. I think Jonathan Harris has been very inconsistent throughout his career. And then Uwazurike for a 4th-round pick did not receive, I think, nearly the playing time that you'd kind of want to see out of that guy. He was kind of in that same Nick Benito boat where it was kind of okay, I feel like for a team that's struggling, that's clearly looking towards the future, we should be getting to see more of this guy, and we're not. So there's clearly a reason for that, you know? And I mean, it's not like we have a new defensive line coach, so it'll be interesting to see if Kolar has either warmed up to Uwazurike or if Uwazurike has really grown a little bit. It'll be interesting to see. That was a whole word soup dumped on you.
No, and I appreciated it, Frankie. I'm going to go. You laid out a great case for cornerbacks. I agree with Paul. I think cornerback is the biggest need on this team right now, just because of if every single year, I heard Daniel Jeremiah say this. I did hear him say this. He said, when you go around and ask NFL teams, hey, what do you guys need this offseason? Almost every single team is going to say right tackle and cornerback depth. Because cornerbacks get hurt within a season a lot. You're playing 3 of them on the field. One's going to get hurt. What depth do you have behind that? 2 probably get hurt. What depth do you have behind that? And you're only as strong as your weakest link in the secondary to me. You can draw more attention to somebody. But at the same time, if someone's not good playing out there, they're going to get burnt. The team's going to pick on them. You can pick on a bad DB out there. You most definitely can. Good offense coordinator is going to do that all the time. So cornerback is my biggest. Running back is a big need for this Broncos team. I've said it before. I think Samaje Perine is a 3rd down back that can play on 1st and 2nd. I'm not saying that you take him out on those downs. It's just kind of the phrase, I guess. 1st and 2nd down, the guy that you like running the ball is what I mean. And 3rd down, the guy you like having in there in passing situations. I want a running back that's better at running the football, pure runner. I want a 2-down type back. And the way the Broncos have built this team, the reason why I say it's important is because if they want to play smash mouth football, you have to have a running back that is going to play smash mouth football. Plain and simple. So I would think running back's pretty important. An interior defensive line, I put this one last only because I think they're going to sign somebody. I think after the draft is done, I think they're going to go out there and get a vet in this room.
But do you think they need to sign someone, Joey? Because then wouldn't that be a need?
Yeah, no, you're 1,000% right. I'm just using a loophole. So they're gonna go out there and sign somebody. So it is the lowest of my needs. They're gonna sign a vet that can come in there and play when needed. And that's kind of my take on that one. Are you ready to move on to the next question?
No, that was a good one.
Perfect. Christopher Hart says, name a few players you are banging the table for the Broncos to draft. We got to get these guys type of players. Frankie, is there anybody that comes to the top of your head?
Let's go back and forth.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'm going to go number 1, Keanu Benton. I've been saying it for 2 years now because I thought he was coming out last draft. If you want to talk about a guy who provides a little bit of pass rush help, but also is a great run defender, I think Keanu Benton is the 2nd best defensive lineman in this entire class, and that's no joke. I genuinely believe he is that good, plays an incredible amount of strength, really good leverage. He's been doing it at Wisconsin since he was 19 years old, and he's only 21 right now. This is a absolute beast of a player, and one I would be just in love if he ended up in Denver. It would be so cool seeing him reunite with Matt Henningsen. Would be awesome. They were absolutely dominant next to each other and was at Wisconsin. So that would be my first pick. I want that to happen so desperately.
Yeah,
Yours.
I think that one would be fantastic. Primo Ooze kind of gave me one, and Frankie, you put me on. Julius Brents, Kansas State. It would make me really, really excited. We drafted him in our mock draft. Frankie, 6'4", 40-inch vertical. He's a freak. Here, I think he ran a 4.53 40. He's one of those guys that you would want to match, and you laid this out perfect. If you guys want to go watch the clip or watch the podcast, it was on the last one we posted. It's, I think, the most recent clip on the Let's Talk Broncos YouTube. If you want to go watch Frankie's take on that. But hey, go give Christian Parker some athletes to go work with. It's why you brought him back. It's why he survived through all these coaching staffs the Broncos brought in. Christian Parker is really good at his job. Give him some athletes that have traits to be really good football players and let him do his thing. Julius Brents would fit that perfectly for me. It would be really exciting having Patrick Surtain, 6'2" on one side, Brents on the other side, 6'4". Oh, that would get me excited.
Yeah. No, then my next one, I'll go Sam Laporta out of Iowa. He's just such a consistently good tight end across the board, blocks really well. Iowa does a lot of fun stuff with their tight ends. And I mean, they run a very like pro style offense most of the time. And like, I really truly believe that he's going to be one of the guys in this class that he's going to like, by the time it's like year 2, year 3, year 4, I really think he's going to be one of the up and coming tight ends in the league. This entire tight end class is super stacked. So he's the guy I'm kind of expecting to fall a little bit, but Laporta, like, his skill set combined with Dulcich and then Manhertz, like they would be a perfect little trifecta, I think, in a tight end room. I think he makes so much sense for a Sean Payton pick. So he would be my next choice. If Sam Laporta from Iowa could end up in a Denver Broncos uniform, that would be pretty sick. Hopefully better luck with him than the last Iowa tight end that ended up in Denver.
How important, I'm going to ask you one more question, and we have 2 more after this, so I'll make this one quicker. Let's rapid fire this one. How important is tight end to the Broncos, do you think? Like, why is this a position the Broncos should draft if they should?
I think it's very important, especially when you talk about the possibility that they end up moving off of one of the receivers like Jerry Jeudy or Courtland Sutton. As we're going to keep banging that nail on the head. This team wants to run the football. This team wants to run out of jumbo sets. This team is going to be running to run out of 13, 12, 22. They're going to be wanting to go huge on guys and really outmuscle them. I think Sean Payton is kind of recognizing that as these defenses get more soft, and we've kind of seen this around the league a little bit. You saw this with the Chiefs last year being willing to go into more of these jumbo sets. As these defenses start playing you more soft, as they're in base nickel, they're in base dime packages, you can just pound the rock against these guys. If they're going to have 5-6 DBs out there that are all 6'1" and under and all weigh 205 and less, let's put 3 6'6", 250-pound dudes out there, knock them the hell over, and then Javonte Williams is really hard to bring down. That's a recipe for success. So, and when you talk about like, I kind of like believe, I think, or well, not I believe, I think, I believe in this offense, or I believe in Sean Payton to be able to kind of generate, I don't know, to get the most out of whatever offensive weapon they bring in. And when I talk about this tight end class is just really good. If you were to say, hey, Frankie, they brought in, one of your favorite tight ends, one of your favorite receivers, and one of your favorite running backs from this class, I think I'd almost want them to bring in a tight end because of how confident I am in the strength of the class and how confident I am in Sean Payton to get the most out of that player.
Mm-hmm. So, right. I appreciate that answer there. I think you nailed that. The league is definitely getting lighter. That has been a trend for a while now. Mm-hmm. Linebackers, defensive linemen, all the way down the list. Speed has been the thing everybody really, really wants. And with that, you're getting lighter players, teams that are easier to run against. Let's move on to the next question here. Christopher asks, what positions do you feel the Broncos must invest in via this year's NFL draft? Is there any position where you're like, if they don't draft this, what the hell are we doing out there?
Yeah, man. I mean, I think we've touched on pretty good, like corner, receiver. I think that they need to add a body into possibly the edge room. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. I wouldn't hate if they added like a developmental tackle if they really are planning to move on from Bulls in the nearer future. I think that would be a decent option. Center is the one that everybody wants, and me as much as well, because I do have major concerns about Lloyd Cushenberry, though. Like, I will say one thing that I do kind of expect is if they do draft a center, I do not necessarily believe that Lloyd is just like a shoe-in to lose that job. I think one thing we got to keep in mind is that Lloyd has been getting to play as an NFL center for the past couple of years. We've always heard how good he is in meetings, how good he is at the mental aspect side of the game seems to be where Lloyd thrives. So I wouldn't be shocked if a rookie center comes in, kind of needs some more time to learn. I'm sure he might, rookie center is probably going to end up being more physical. You probably got something like that, but I wouldn't be too shocked if Lloyd still starts the year if they end up drafting a center.
Yeah, no, I agree with that for sure. Mine would be running back. If the Broncos went this entire draft without drafting a running back, I would ask them, what the hell are they doing?
Yeah.
You're meaning you're going to go out there and sign a guy, but in this loaded running back class, you're not going to go draft one. You're not even going to take one in the 5th round, sixth round, where some running backs more than other positions succeed. It would be stupid to me if they didn't draft a running back at least somewhere in this class. On to this next one. Do you think Denver will add 3 more picks in the 23 draft? And this is from Paul. Shout out to Paul. He's in the comment right now. He agrees with me. Thank you, Paul. Do you think that Denver will add 3 more picks this year's class?
No, I'll just say no. Like it's so tough. I wish, and I know like a lot of people like kind of expect Sean Payton to get closer and closer to having the 10 picks that he always talks about, but like they just don't have that much. Like they don't have that much high value capital that when you're talking about like, oh, they're going to be able to turn 1 pick into multiple. What is a 3rd round pick trading down for? Like a 5th and a 7th. So if you're talking about adding 3 picks, I just don't know how likely that is. I'll be honest, like, while that does that sound enticing to me? Like, would I be happy if on day 2 of draft night they take pick 67 and they turn it into like a 4th and a 7th round pick? I really don't know. Like, I don't think I'll be too hyped because, again, as we're saying, I think there will be some really good options available at that 67, 68 spot. And this team needs players. Like, I know, like, the whole quantity argument and George Payton's so good at drafting, but like, I'll be honest, like I'd kind of just like to see them draft like straight up. Like I'm not saying throughout the entire thing, I expect them to trade down at some point, but I think it's a really tough sell for me to imagine that with the current capital that they have in place, them going out and being able to acquire that much more capital,
Yeah, no, it's tough to see. The way you would do this is like one trade down somewhere, and then I also think that if you were to deal a player, that's somehow that's where you could get that. Is it super likely? No, I think that they will add more picks, though. It would shock me if the Broncos didn't go in and add more picks. 3 more picks is tough. I could see the Broncos, especially since they had those back-to-back thirds, being like, yeah, we'll drop down 7, 8, 9 spots or whatever the case, maybe 10 spots, and just pick up a 6th round pick. We're already down here in this. Let's just get darts to throw out the board. I could see it. 3 picks is a little tough, just moving picks around, though, especially where their value is. If you were to do that just in one deal, you know what I mean? They don't have a 1st or 2nd, you would be moving down the draft board dramatically. And you're like, do I even want to do that at this point? To what Frankie was saying, right? So I pretty much agree with you, Frankie. I think the way you would do this is if you were to trade a player, and that it would be easier to do that.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it to keep in mind too is, I mean, from what we saw with Sean Payton in New Orleans, like that man was aggressive with getting the guys he wants. It wouldn't shock me if we see him move up. I'm not saying they're going to move into the 1st round or something, but if it gets to like day 3, they have a guy they really like in the 5th round, and it's going to cost them their 6th and 7th to get up there. I see no hesitancy from Sean Payton in this coaching staff. Yeah. They have no bad will built up. This guy is trying to build the roster in his vision. He's not saying, oh, George, let me get you as many picks as possible. Like, I hope that they end up being a good relationship that can work together. But guys, this is Sean Payton's football team. I don't think he really gives much of a heck about what George Payton has to say or his drafting ability. I think he's going to say, hey, I have the guys I like. They're available right now, and I'm gonna take them because I can. I'm not going to say, oh, well, George, you do so good with that 7th round pick. I remember your Jonathan Cooper selection from 2 years ago. Man, that one really blew us out of the water. Like, hell no. If I'm Sean Payton and I see a great running back and get in the 5th round, but I got to give up my 7th round pick to move up a few spots to get it. Go do it, Sean. This is why you're here, So I think that's where it also becomes kind of a hard thing as well, is I think Sean Payton's going to go get the guys he wants to get.
No, and Frankie, I totally agree with you there. But I think that's all. That's all the questions we had today. It went a good while of a podcast. We're almost 50 minutes in. Shout out to everybody who was in the comments today. Primos, Paul, Cam Parker, everybody, Colton Cooper, everybody that was in the chat, anybody that's
all the people
watching
on Twitter.
us live. Yes, shout out to everybody that was taking a listen to us tonight. If you are listening afterwards, this will be uploaded to YouTube right after. We're live at 6 p.m. Mountain Time almost every day. We're not live on the weekend almost all the other days, so we're live except for Tuesday. So please tune in if you guys want to join the conversation. That would be appreciated. But Frankie, where can they find your work at? Everybody in the chat.
Of course. Go follow me over at Frankie's Film on Twitter, Frankie's Film NFL on TikTok. I'm over here every Thursday with Joey. Let's Talk Broncos podcast. And then any Irish listeners, if there are any, or just anyone who wants to get some good interviews, some good insight, go listen to the Irish NFL show, man. I get to work with Colin and Brian and Carino over there, and it's a great time, man. We get to interview some really cool people. I got to interview Adam Rank and Matt Miller today and talk some fun stuff about the draft and about fantasy, get bullied a little bit about my headphones and how I look young and sometimes like Justin Bieber by the Irish folk. It's a great time. It's a wonderful podcast. So go give it a listen if you ever got the time. But make sure you're liking and subscribing to the Let's Talk Broncos. Likes and subscribes. It's right down there. That's the name. Click that. Leave us comments. Send us more questions, and yeah, thank you guys all for tuning in.
Yeah. And guys, if you're listening right now, we have a special guest, our first guest, our big guest, coming on at some point. I'm not going to give anything up yet, but we have, your wildest imagination. Think about it. We have somebody cool coming on the podcast after the draft. So it'll be really cool. So keep an eye out for that. If you're looking out for my work, you can follow me at JR Drafts. Make sure you're following the Let's Talk Broncos YouTube. I'm on 4 things over there. I need a pay raise. So make sure you're subscribing, listening to everything we have going on. We're working really hard on it. Shout out to Frankie, who's always working hard on this podcast. Appreciate him a ton. But till next time, guys, go Broncos.